Mr. Ankur Aggarwal, so we have this pratha at 𝐄𝐧𝐡𝐚, right? That before we, as and when we take the names, there's a small question that we ask, and we'll give you an introduction, and then you can let us know what your answer is. So yes, Mr. Ankur Aggarwal, Managing Director, Technology, Accenture, India, that is. Sir, what is that one habit or strategy that you adopted in your life which enhanced the way of living? It could be anything philosophical, emotional, analytical, anything under the sun.
I think one habit that I've adopted in strategy is, I think, trying to think of something at the beginning of the year. And then, but what I did was stick on to planning, going beyond planning and executing. So two things, taking care of health. So getting back to the sport I used to play, which was table tennis, and moving on to the path of spirituality. Both have helped me in my professional career as well.
Fantastic answers. Fantastic. We've got Mr. Anand Hadgaonkar, the Chief Information Officer, Whirlpool. Mr. Anand, the same question to you.
Yep. I think from my perspective, what I've started learning about is go with the flow. So that actually works and helps you to really adjust and gives you that flexibility to work around it.
Lovely answer. Lovely answer, Mr. Anand. Of course, we have Mr. Farhan Khan, the Chief Information Officer, Allied Blenders and Distillers. Mr. Khan, what would your answer be?
Mine, while you are on riding a cycle, so I'm convert myself into a professional cyclist. So that's something you give us a biggest peace of mind. You can think a lot. You have multiple time, means humongous time for yourself, for a strategy that you are working, the project that you are working. So you and the beautiful nature all across is something that you can think about.
Lovely, Mr. Khan, that was absolutely fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker for the session, Mr. Dhaval Pandya, the Corporate Chief Information Officer, Piramal Enterprise Limited. Mr. Dhaval, same question. What would your answer be?
So I think with COVID, at least, what I have learned is that it's always important to have a backup plan. Always have a plan B because all my life I have never set my foot in the kitchen. And with COVID, you spend a lot of time at home, and people tend to think that you have a lot of time, and you are tasked with things that you have never done in your life before. So always have a backup plan. For starters, I started. I can at least do tea, Maggie, and things like those, which I always relied on my spouse or mother to do for me. So always have a backup plan. It helps. Yeah.
Mr. Dhaval, you started off with for starters. I mean, and what you are actually making are actually starters only. Good. I think you've got your starters covered. Fantastic answer. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, this is not the session. The actual session begins now. And the very first, beautiful answer, Mr. Dhaval. So we'll start off with you. So the question is, it is said that the first step towards digital transformation is transitioning to hybrid cloud. So while that's a big step towards building agility and resilience into the crux of the process, what does it mean from data security and perspective, and what are some factors that need due diligence on the same?
Thanks a lot, Nikita, and a very good afternoon to all my fellow panelists and to you, Nikita. So right today, adoption of cloud, if I were to take a step back and say it's not even a discussion anymore. It's a given that organizations are adopting cloud in one or more formats, and more often than not, it either tends to be in a hybrid model. And I think a lot of this has to do with the advent of or the acceleration of the digital transformation. And the advent of the new technologies, and couple it with the customer experience that the customer of yours is expecting today. It requires you to move to certain niche technologies or move towards more contemporary technologies. And these technologies are better delivered on cloud than within the four boundaries of the organization. Because it provides you the scalability, it provides you the resilience, it provides you even the option to move out if it is not working out. It could be a SaaS offering that you're going with, or it could be a POC that you're doing on one of the hyperscalers. So by very nature, you are moving towards a hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud model. And as you rightly said, whenever the term cloud pops up in a discussion, the first thing that works against it is security. To say that, you are less secure on a cloud compared to if you are on premise, which again, which is again worth challenging, because I think with the evolving cloud, even the security parameters that these providers are adopting and implementing is also evolving, and it is only becoming better by the day. What is important though is that you need to have a security posture in mind, which your organization subscribes to, and you ensure that whoever you are tying up with is helping you to adhere to that security posture, if not doing better. So that's where I think things like ZTA and inner SASEs and even the SD-WANs and these things come into picture, which become more of the fringes that help you build that utopian security posture that you're talking about. So definitely data security, and I would say that a conversation that goes along with it, the data privacy, become very, very important. More so because when you're on a hybrid model, you will have a lot of joints that come into picture where you're integrating with some of either the existing applications or you're integrating with some of the newer offerings that you're going with. And I think the joints tend to be the most weakest part in the entire plumbing, right? That's where the most leakages tend to happen. And that's where I think a lot of focus goes from the prying eyes of, say, the malwares or the attackers, etc., to say that, okay, how can we basically inject into this stem of information and try to compromise it. So it's very important, like I said, to have a security posture in mind and understand that what is non-negotiable and what is negotiable to you as an organization, and always keep the customer at the center, and then think about this rather than thinking about it from, what do you think the customer desires. Now, if it is matter of statutory or compliance, it is simpler. But I think the real question or the real complexity comes in when it is more of a choice. So that's where I think, it is not just about safeguarding the data, but it is also about thinking what next needs to be done when it comes to the data. It's the entire data at rest, data in motion, and now they're talking about data in memory also, right? So how do you basically safeguard all these factors together in a cloud native application that you're building, and leverage whatever tools such as, so today there are AI-based capabilities available which do a DPI to better predict the attack, or look at some factors which are lead indicators to an attack, and how do you basically do put in a single pane of glass through either an SIEM or be it an XDR or whatever it may be, to basically be, but it is important to have that capability to be able to monitor, predict, and react in a timely manner in a non-compromised fashion to the security threats.
Very interestingly put, Mr. Pandya. I mean, that's that's one perspective of, you speak about how everybody's wanting to go on a cloud, but there are, of course, a lot of apprehensions. We would, of course, want to take Mr. Ankur Aggarwal's perspective on the same question. So, Mr. Ankur, what would your thoughts be?
I think Dhaval has put it across very well, but I just like to add a couple of points. As enterprises consider migrating to a hybrid cloud environment, right, to meet their IT needs, there are some challenges around security they will need to navigate through or overcome. First one being around the whole aspect of visibility and control. Now, to secure and ultimately reap the rewards from hybrid cloud, companies should strive to automate anything and everything they can, right, and avoid manual processes wherever you can build in an automation. It's important to put some sort of tooling in place to provide centralized management and visibility across the entire heterogeneous infrastructure. But it's also important that such tools are open and flexible with all cloud providers. The next key aspect to manage is the aspect of compliance and governance, right? So one of the biggest challenges that comes not from any one regulation, but from the fact that many companies are still manually checking to see that they are complying and meeting custom or regulatory security baselines for security compliance and various audit requirements. Here again, companies should be looking for a way to automate the scanning and remediation of security controls using open source tooling. The goal obviously being to provide crystal clear visibility into the tasks. And lastly, I mean, protecting data at rest and in motion. it's important to make sure that data encryption at each level is implemented strategically, and only an authorized system should have access to the desired data. There should also be well-defined access data logging and security audit to monitor the access logs continuously.
And crystal clear perspective is exactly what Mr. Dhaval and Mr. Ankur have provided. Fantastic answer, gentlemen. We'll quickly move on to our next question. So the next question is all said and done, right? There's no denying that there's a looming cloud scale gap today. In fact, 86% of survey respondents, that is done by Wakefield Research, are projecting that IT shortages will continue to slow down cloud-based project performance. So can you share your perspective, learning, and recommendations on this? We'll start off with Mr. Anand.
Sure. I mean, I think, as you rightly said, I mean, whichever research you pick up and see, it very clearly outlines that there is a skill set gap that we have. I mean, one number that sticks in my mind, which was somewhere I read in early January this year, an article which was even published in Times of India. What it said that, look, I mean, you have millions of IT professionals, and then if you take a cut of those and slice that by different segments, and then get to the cloud specialists having 8+ years of experience, the number comes down to roughly 25,000 skilled professionals. So if you can just imagine amount of demand in the marketplace and the number that we are talking about, it is kind of very obvious to say that there is a big skill gap in the country for such professionals having the right skill sets in place. Of course, I mean, the requirement as well as, I mean, the demand and supply gap will get bridged based upon how people respond to it, and then how you kind of equipped the teams to really handle the technology in parallel to what they are also doing in. So there are multiple ways one can handle this situation. But then if you look at it in terms of an opportunity, I see this as a big opportunity for us to really look at actively focusing on and building that skill set, which makes it much more easier for organizations to leverage it.
Anand, my God, 35,000 for a strength of 1.3. I'm just extrapolating, right? 1.3 billion Indians is insane. And you speak about, there's one perspective to look at it as 35,000 is very less, but the other would be thinking of it as an opportunity. And this reminds me of, there's a story by Bata. So Bata went to Africa once, and they had this salesperson, and the salesperson said that nobody's wearing shoes. This was back in those days when Bata had just started. So that's one way of looking at it, was nobody's wearing shoes. The other was, wow, nobody's wearing shoes. All our shoes are going to be sold here. And that's how Bata actually became #1 in Africa. So I think this is such a beautiful way of putting it. Fantastic answer, Mr. Anand. And we would love to have Mr. Dhaval's point of, what would your say be on the same question, sir?
So I think this problem persists with anything that is new, and it's a part of the product life cycle where the product curve leads the skill curve. And when people see traction, that's when they want to jump onto it. So you talk about any technology today, and I'm talking about skilled resources here who can make meaningful deployment of the technologies that we are talking about. So that always remains a gap, and a couple of ways to do this. And I think the first and the most efficient or the most effective way could be reskilling, where you rather than trying to continuously scout for newer talent, it is better to use the resources within and make them cognizant of the fact that the technology is moving elsewhere, and it is better to move with the technology. Now that is easier said than done, because there is always a organizational inertia or maybe even the technology inertia that prevents from doing it. So it's more a cultural it has more a cultural angle also to it, where you have to then see as to how do you drive this message top down, and how do you make continuous skilling and learning or relearning, as they call it, how do you make it a part of your ongoing culture. And so that's where I think a lot of thrust on L&D and supported learning comes into picture, where people are meaningfully incentivized, and not necessarily monetarily, but meaningfully incentivized to be able to take that detour towards the new technology that is coming in. And I think one effective model that I have seen working is establishing a center of excellence. So if you put a center of excellence in place, you're clearly tasking people with certain technologies that they need, they are the custodians of. And when people are given ownership, I think they do better than when they are told to do certain things. So if they are given this ownership to basically say that, okay, we want to become, say, something like a cloud first company, and you would lead the way in terms of trying to identify the right technology that comes to the fore and meaningfully deploy it in a cost effective manner, having a business case in mind is very, very important, because then it becomes measurable as to how the center of excellence is also performing. That is one. The second, and the age old methodology of doing it is having the right partners in place to be able to support you with for example, point requirements. So are there partners with these technological expertise that become a part of your workforce for the set duration, and then they not just leave, but they put in place a model whereby the people who are taking the handover from them are able to effectively run it in their absence. So I think these are a couple of ways in which this can be handled, because if you go scouting for market for the skill sets, either they will not be available or they will be available at a price that will not justify the benefit that it is going to give you.
Fantastic answer, Mr. Dhaval. And what a point, right? Meaningful incentivization and not monetary incentivization. Personally, if you were to ask me, I don't think there's anything more meaningful than monetary, but I'm sure others will think otherwise. Fantastic answer, Mr. Dhaval. Of course, our next question goes out to Mr. Farhan Khan. So the question to you is, what's been the biggest cultural resistance to cloud adoption, and what steps did the leadership take to ensure that people saw the sheer potential of cloud adoption and its implications to meet their own goals?
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Nikita. Cloud, I think it's a community as of now. If you're talking about in the year 2021, it's no longer basically to be adopted. It's basically what kind of a platform we are going to adopt for the cloud. But similarly, there are some resistance, which is basically every enterprise organization has to go through it. There are some technical challenges that we have other than the resistance, like the vendor lock, security, compliance. Other than this, there are inherent challenges within the organization itself. For example, if there is any software change or services, escalations, of course, how the escalation has to be happening, the support is also to be happening. There is a team which basically provides the support the entire IT enterprise architecture. This is one of the teams which pushes the entire IT initiative within the organization. If you go for a cloud, the first and the foremost things comes out from them, because they feel that yes, the control is going out from their hand. The reason being, what they do in a typical enterprise business, they are controlling the entire architecture, data patching, recovery, data updates, and everything. And after when you go for a cloud, this is managed by of course the cloud vendor. Second thing which is very important is there are IT managers those are responsible for the different aspects of IT. Sometimes they also feel yes, the controls is going out of our hand. The team which is basically reporting to them is also so first is the department IT itself is one of the resistance which comes from. Other than this, there are people, those are associated. In enterprise like us, we have a power user because of substance of applications, accessibility all across the organizations. We have to deploy some power users who has a more power to say, or when you go for applications, they have a more choosing options to basically say this is the application. So they are also one of the core people. Sometimes they also exist. Few people, sometimes they go to the leadership also, they talk about that, this is how the application, it is going out from our hand, it is going to cloud. We don't know where the cloud, whether it is going to be India or abroad. These all things, comes out when we talk about. So first is and foremost, we have to set our house right. Whether it's IT or IT managers, applications, infrastructure team, they have to sit and understand what as in cloud strategy is going to be, how the adoptions is going to happen. And if there is any rescaling or a training or anything which basically help them to grow at a different level, it has to be tell them in a very clarity or a clear platform. This is how the adoption strategy is going to happen. Similarly, we need to prepare a strategic plan. This is how the legacy and non-legacy application is going to move from on-prem to a cloud options.
What is surprising? I mean, that's such an interesting and surprising answer, Mr. Khan. I mean, you mentioned that the resistance, the first layer of resistance comes from the IT team itself, which I think sets the concrete for our next question, right? So our next question is, how is cloud adoption enabling enterprises to ease the transition, which I'm sure is not very easy, from legacy to modern systems? And what are the key indicators CIOs need to be mindful when they lift and shift legacy applications onto cloud? We'll start off with Mr. Ankur Aggarwal.
Thanks for that. I think there are various aspects that need to be considered in a lift and shift strategy. I mean, it's one of the strategies of moving to cloud. And if the question is more specific to that, the first one is this whole aspect around custom applications. That it's a bit harder to move those to cloud. While intuitively it'll appear that usually it's a simple matter to lift and shift commercial applications to cloud, but moving more complex programs that are especially resource intensive presents greater challenges. Since most of these programs are custom built to address the company's specific needs, they would have been developed over time. They are often not able to operate effectively in a typical cloud environment without modifications, right? So they may even require implementation of either a hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud deployment. The second aspect that needs consideration is that most organizations are still operating their same IT infrastructure they had invested in either a few or many years ago. They could have been years of updates, workaround solutions which would have impacted the whole data stack that is residing in those applications. In many cases, companies would probably be better served by really discarding this existing infrastructure and adopting cloud-based applications rather than lifting and shifting those. They will still need to migrate their valuable data, of course, right? But that will be less daunting than moving outdated applications. Sometimes, however, businesses need those legacy applications. As with custom-built systems, legacy infrastructures require special attention and is often not well suited to a pure lift and shift strategy. So moving the application to cloud is though a simple matter of storage, but reconfiguring it to ensure that it really runs effectively in that new environment and aligns with the cloud-driven data sets, and all of that will take more work than typical lift and shift migration project. Those are certain aspects that I just wanted to share with the group.
Amazing answer, Mr. Ankur. I mean, like you mentioned, it's as easy as lift and shift, but with certain legacy systems, that the migration or the mitigation of the data itself is such a big concern. Fantastically put. Of course, Mr. Farhan, we would love to know your perspective on the same question.
Yeah, see, lift and shift, largely if you look at the enterprise that we are in, we are facing two larger prospects and any issues that we have. First is the existing applications which is being developed and custom to basically feed a business object. It's kind of monolithic. So sending them or send them to the cloud adoptions or making them a cloud adaptable is one of the foremost is something very, very important. Number one. Number two, the people those are associated with the enterprise architecture, those are providing the full supports, is their reskilling to reach to the adoptions of a cloud. So these are the two major issues which I believe that those are there. But similarly, if you look at the trend which is happening for the last 4 to 5 years, is the application or a software as a service. there are larger adoptions of a software as a service, not even on a non-critical applications, even for the critical applications also as largely adopted by most of the enterprises. Those are going away from the legacy applications and looking the agility, the rescalability, or resilience as an option for the IT infrastructure. These applications are largely is being used by the enterprises, whether it is functions like HR or means you name it, it is there. There are certain core area where such applications still is in a very developed stage, or maybe not been so far, I have not come across, like utility or like financial services or a banking core services. These are the 2-3 areas where the software as a service is not. But other than this, there are a plethora of applications which basically address the organization need. So adoption, if you look at the adoptions of a SaaS applications, it in every enterprise budget it is reaching to almost 5 to 6x time. And that's how the adoptions and that's how the things are happening in the year of 2020.
Great answer, Mr. Farhan Khan. And I believe Mr. Anand Hadgaonkar has a hard stop. But Mr. Anand, I mean, before you leave, right, what is that one line or that one takeaway which you want to give to your amazing audience members?
Cloud is here to stay. So let's just continue and drive what is appropriate to the organization.
Fantastic answer, Mr. Anand. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you so very much, Mr. Anand. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've got one last question, and this question goes out to Mr. Ankur Aggarwal. Mr. Ankur, the question is, as companies accelerate their digital transformation journey, cloud adoption becomes an imperative. However, each organization has unique needs and vision, and one size, doesn't always fit all. This is especially true for cloud solutions. In this context, what should be the key criteria to choose the right cloud strategy?
Thanks, Zika. That's a very relevant question. One of the most important points in cloud adoption is the aspect of being fit for purpose, right? Now, as one would say, cloud is not really a place, right, where you go. It's actually a strategy. It's an organization's cloud strategy should exist to enable the business strategy, and it should not be operating in a silo. It's not just about another way to store data, access email. It goes well beyond that, right? It can offer cheaper, faster, safer, and more secure ways for you to grow your business, develop new products, services in an innovative manner, and much beyond that as well. I mean, it can be a framework for future success. I mean, the compute cycles have now become a commodity, as some of the fellow panelists were saying. And it's not just migrating to the cloud, but rather integrating cloud into the entire business value chain, which is the need of the hour, right? Industry-specific regulatory and compliance adherence is also a critical factor to consider, making sure you choose the cloud architecture platform that can help you meet compliance standards that apply to your industry and organization, whether it is GDPR or HIPAA or any other frameworks. Make sure that one understands what will it take to achieve compliance once your applications and data are living in that public cloud infrastructure. Data governance and security, I mean, we've spoken a bit about it. I mean, they are definitely very important criteria. You already have a data classification scheme in place that defines types of data according to sensitivities or policies which are there. One needs, and if you have any specific requirements and obligations, you should look for providers that give more choice and control regarding the jurisdiction in which your data is processed or stored or managed. One last thing I would say is the partnerships and integration is a very important criteria. When you choose a cloud provider, you need to think of it in terms of an ecosystem and not just as a single product, right? As representatives of digital companies that all companies are now becoming, you likely use various digital tools, whether it is analytics, machine learning, some form of a consumer interface system. It's no different in terms of cloud providers as well. They also have a network of partners, and it's advisable to know them in advance and make sure they are trusted and reliable. I'll just give an example of a transformation journey wherein we helped Disney take to move from their traditional on-prem environment to the cloud. I mean, Disney, as most of us would know, right? They have been at the forefront of innovation. They are thriving to bring modern experience to markets, which includes driving a lot of it through technology innovation. So when we created the business case for Disney, we did not look at cost only. We looked at the overall risk reduction, speed and agility for modernization. But beyond that, the biggest aspect that Disney wanted was to get closer to where software innovation happens, right? Getting faster adoption of AI, IoT, machine learning. And while putting a real airtight business case for them, we defined the right priorities at the right time and at the right place. We set principles like, cloud first, unless there is a real critical reason why something should not be on cloud. Adopting, changing the entire operational control framework, moving it from traditional waterfall to self-service, self-sustained DevOps way of working. And it's not just about technology, as some of us spoke, it's about significant change management, requiring new skill sets, right training, change of job descriptions, to use cloud very effectively and in the right manner. And in the end, finally, it is all about celebrating successes that come along the entire journey.
Fantastic answer, Mr. Ankur. And this reminds me, there's this line which you said, right? Cloud is actually not a place, it's a strategy. I'm not sure whether all of you have been blessed. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, very much.
Yes. So there's this interview that you must have seen of this lawyer who's basically saying that, cloud, the actual cloud, and when it rains, it's basically data flowing in. It just reminds me, I think that gentleman should have definitely been a part of this discussion. Let us know in the comment box if you have seen that wonderful interview. And I would, of course, right, before we leave, we would love for our amazing leaders to give us that one tip. It could be anything. It could be, like I said, right, we try and keep it in very holistic. So it could be from a life perspective, from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective. What is that one tip which you would want to impart to your lovely, lovely patrons here? We'll start off with Mr. Khan.
Be positive in life. Everything, be strategic, be factful, whatever you are doing, be realistic, be human with everyone. That's the only mantra of life.
Mr. Khan, I'm feeling that line. It's my next WhatsApp status from you. Thank you so much. Mr. Pandya.
So it's a metaphor. It's applicable to this discussion that we are having and outside it. So I would say every cloud has a silver lining. So I would go with that.
Every cloud has a silver lining. Great, fantastic. I mean, that could be the tagline for cloud. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Pandya. We've got Mr. Aggarwal. Mr. Aggarwal, over to you.
I think it goes like this. It's my favorite movie as well. 3 simple words: life is beautiful. So I love the movie. That's my principle of life. It's my WhatsApp tagline. I enjoy it. So live life and stay happy.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was such a pleasure having all of you for our session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.